Hello everybody, how's it going today? Glowplasma231 here, back in day to talk about Kagurabachi, chapter number 84. This chapter is titled, The Wounded. Oh my gosh, they're the wounded souls of the Kagurabachi. I don't even know at this point. But we have a really good chapter of Kagurabachi here to talk about. Again, I'm talking about this chapter like a week after it was initially released. At least it's not as bad as the last video I did, where it was like, it came out after the next chapter was coming out on that Sunday, so there's always positives to getting back on track, you know what I'm saying? But we also have a really brilliant chapter of Kagurabachi this week, one that's very dynamic, really finally shows us, the audience, that, like, yes, Chihiro doesn't just have Nishiki as a power anymore. You guys remember Kuro and Akka? Well, at least we see plenty of Akka in this chapter, and at least makes a whole lot of sense for the general purpose. Along with, hey, do you remember, like, all of those people that were going around with Chihiro the Masumi? They're finally back, and honestly, just a really great chapter of Kagurabachi we have, eventually ending up with the whole idea of the cracks are starting to form in Samura's ambition. And by that, I mean, there's a chip in Tobimune. We'll be getting there by the end of this video. I'm sorry if I spoiled it, but either way, we just have a really good chapter of Kagurabachi to talk about, and I just feel like going ahead and hopping into this chapter of Kagurabachi. But of course, we're going to talk about chapter number 84. We first need to talk about what happened in chapter number 83 of Kagurabachi. And last chapter was a chapter really all built around one ideal. And that was the ideal of, hey guys, Inten's true realm, the whole reason Inten was created by Kunishige and Chihiro in the first place was to be an enchanted blade that would go through and destroy all of the other enchanted blades in due time, pretty much. And I mean, that's what we see Inten is starting to do, and Chihiro's whole idea is like, hey, with the Inten, I will break the Shinichi. Of course, trying to give Samura that hope that it exists out there and teach him another way to live. And it was in that moment where we ended off last chapter of Chihiro doing that whole thing of like, hey, I'm going to break the Shinichi. And it was a little bit of that weird thing to where Chihiro was seemingly going through and like was in that sort of mind space where he saw the Rokuhira household where him and his father were working on the sword and doing all of that. And the very end of the chapter was like the goldfish coming towards him and Chihiro teleporting the sword to him. And presumably that was in the, I'm going to say quote-unquote, real world, because we start off the beginning of this chapter with seeing Chihiro almost in that exact same pose, holding the Shinichi down towards the ground, standing there in his, like, ninja suit attire, pretty much, and, of course, the blade is no longer right next to Samura on top of this roof where Samura was standing last chapter after he had kicked Chihiro down into this pool of water, right? Well, Samura just says, like, hey, I mean, break the Shinichi? Like, I get real. It's pure fantasy. Even against Tobimune, you haven't so much as nicked it, right? As Samura even thinks in the background of, like, I mean, Inten is the only enchanted blade Rokuhira made after the war. And an enchanted blade capable of destroying other enchanted blades, I mean, that's the kind of thing that Rokuhira would have thought of, right? But we really get that whole idea that, like, yeah, it doesn't matter. Samura is not going to let go of his resolve to be the one to deal with this all at the end of the day. And from the ground cheers, it's like, hey, no, this is just beginning. As, again, Samura just thinks back all the way to back in the day, of course, whenever he met the young Chihiro for the very first time, and he had just shown him all of those fantastic sword skills. I think this was the flashback we saw in, like, chapter number 61, or no, 51 or 52, somewhere in there. But the whole idea of, like, hey, you aren't trying to become a swordsman, are you? And Chihira's like, no, I just want to be a swordsmith like my dad. And Samura just thinks, like, hey, even if you did have that power, this is a burden from the past. It is not yours to shoulder. And of course, Chihiro doesn't agree with this, being like, no, it is mine, because I am Kunishige Rokuhira's son. And Samura's like, well, I see then. As we see that he sort of, like, grips he grips his, like, the hilt of his sword tighter is, I guess, what I'm trying to say. As we see that Chihiro does the same thing. And water splashes off from up around Chihiro, as we just see all of the crow feathers starting to get blown out of the way, as we see there's just a trail of watery Nishiki moving throughout the area towards some of Samura's feathers, right? And as this happens, Samura thinks like, oh no, Chihiro's faster now, he's coming towards me. And we even see this happen, as we see that Samura is getting ready, gets his sword over and ready, and Chihiro is heading towards him. It's like Samura actively knew where Chihiro was coming, right? And Chihiro just thinks like, wow, like I've never felt this level of ferocity. This time, Samura is really going for the Intin. But as this blade is going straight for Chihiro's face, well, Chihiro teleports out of the way to a fish that he had placed right behind Samura. And this catches Samura off guard. Of course, this gives Chihiro a free shot to go through and hit at Samura's back. Samura knows what he's doing, puts a hand behind his back, and like almost efficiently just blocks the blade just like that. And Samura's like, okay, that wasn't just speed alone. If it was, I would have just got him. What he did is like, no, don't tell me. As he sort of put together, yes, Chihiro has been able to figure out how to use Crow through Akka, so he can now use it pretty much, right? And here on page number 5, we get this really cool visual where we just see both of them disappear all of a sudden, and just a crow feather and a goldfish spiraling around each other as both of them now reappear here in the moment. Both have their blades in their hands, are clashing here again. As Samura just thinks like, wow, like what Chihiro's doing is the same as Crow. Is that a fundamental part of the power of Intin? Or he suddenly realizes, no, it's Akka. It absorbed Tobimune's Crow without breaking the flow. As Chihiro just thinks like, no, I just feel it, how much I've synced up with the Intin here in this moment. If I can't even scratch Tobimune with Mr. Samura wielding it, breaking the Shinichi is a far-fetched fantasy. As Chihiro just thinks like, hey, I will prove it to you, right? Intin's power. I'll show you how you can live. As we see that Chihiro comes down, clashes swords once more, Samura, and all of a sudden, Samura just actively disappears again. We see that they go through, like, all of this wind is flowing out around the area from all the pressure of these swords going back and forth, hitting each other. All of the crow feathers just, like, spiraling around in the air. And Samura's like, no. This is a joke. Until we see that they eventually are on the ground, finally, in this sort of, like, middle of, like, this courtyard where there's a bunch of lanterns thing around. And they're both standing on this paved area, this paved walkway, pretty much, right? And we get a visual very reminiscent to chapter number 58, where we saw both Iruha and Samura staring down each other, both hands on the blade, getting ready to use the EI White Purity style. And the two of them are just standing there almost mimicking that, but instead of, like, standing very far away, we see the hilts of their blade are almost touching each other, right? As Chihiro just is like, hey, are you going to teleport against Samura? And Samura's like, no, enough. It's time for you to submit. And we see that both of them draw the EI White Purity stuff. They're storing up their energy, go through, clash the blades, and, well, Samura has the upper hand. Chihiro just can't deal with the pressure of Samura's strike. We see the Intin flies out of Chihiro's hands, Tobimune stays still in Samura's, and Chihiro ends up hitting the ground. He's just like, gosh, like, Samura hit so hard, but, like, I have to keep going. And he goes back down to reach the Intin, of course, because he dropped it, and he realizes that his left hand is a bloodied mess. We see just, like, his pinky finger is the only one that doesn't have massive amounts of blood on it, right? But it's like, it looks like all of these callus burst in his hands, like there's blood dripping down off of it, and we see this is incredibly painful to Chihiro, as Samura just thinks like, hey, that kid should be able to wield his blade anymore, and he's like, again, Chihiro, it's a fantasy. It is over. As Chihiro then hears all of this wishing wind going on around him, and almost like this tapping of footsteps, as he then looks around to his surroundings here in the moment. Well, now we go into a very, very brief flashback, and I necessarily don't remember when this was, but I don't think we were supposed to have seen this scene earlier, but this seems to be whenever all of our crew, of course, Chihiro and Masumi, were making their way to Kyoto to try to get a lead on Iori a few chapters ago after all of the Samura stuff, right? And that's how he ended up in the Kyoto Bloodshed Hotel and all this other stuff, right? And I can't tell if they're taking, like, a train or, like, a subway or something, but either way, I think they're taking a train. But they're pretty much sitting down on it, and we see that they're pretty much talking about, like, hey, when Samura wields the Enchanted Blade Tobimune, he has no blind spots. And Rose sort of mentions, like, hey, so how does feathers he uses for detection work? And Chihiro pretty much explains, like, hey, if I had to guess, it's probably very similar to intense goldfish that I use. They can read the shape of anything they touch in minute detail. With regard to surrounding environments, I think they can also detect temperature, sound, airflow, giving him a natural sense of space. Of course, sort of makes sense. We can sort of see his surrounding area with that, making him nearly invincible with his god tier sword skills also. So, like, yeah, as we all know, Samura is a powerful guy. And pretty much we see Rose saying, like, hey, so what you're saying, Chihiro, is, like, if the feathers don't detect us, we might be able to invade him. Moku pretty much says, like, hey, we are Masumi, we have these really good stealth techniques, and these techniques enable us to conceal heat, sound, noise, and hostile energy, so we're going to be able to eliminate nearly all traces of our presence and blend into the general environment. And of course, being that Sumi didn't say anything yet, she pretty much explains, like, hey, and even if he could detect us faintly by our physical displacement of the air, without vision for Mr. Samura, the Masumi might as well be Ghost. As of course, after Chihiro got knocked away, this is what he heard and what he saw was the three members of the Masumi, Ro, Moku, and Sumi, all coming in to help Chihiro fight Samura. We see they all have their small short blades in their hands, and like, it's honestly a really cool visual that we get, because it's like, the three members of the Masumi like fading in and out of existence here in the moment, as it's honestly really cool, because like we take a look at Sumi and we see like a little bit of her suit jacket flowing in the wind, but like we don't see one of her arms, like part of like her waist isn't even there. Like we see Moku reaching back up to his sword, but it's like the ethereal lines drifting about. Is honestly a really cool idea, right? And here in the moment, we just see Ro thinking like, hey, unless Samura can focus intensely on us, we can vanish. And we'll use that to strike and disappear again and again. In this battle of Enchanted Blades, we alone have the power to intercede. Of course, the best allies for Samura to fight alongside are also the worst people for Samura to fight. Really cool idea here. I don't know why a lot of us, at least I didn't put this together earlier whenever they were first introduced. Granted, whenever we got that whole Masumi chapter to Makizumi was the wrong name for them, I guess. That I don't know if that was just like an issue with how the English translation was, or I'm pretty sure that was something that Hokuzono said. It was like, hey, just so you guys know, I messed that up and it's Masumi instead of Makizumi, so either way, still pretty cool at the end of the day, right? And it's honestly really funny, this page turn on the page number 14, as we see this whole idea of like, yes, the Masumi are going to help Chihiro take down Samura here in the moment, right? As we see that Chihiro is now sort of in the middle of this battle, right? Because what is happening, there is a gateway, and then there's a little like bit of a brick sidewalk going up to a more central area. The central area is where Samura is currently fighting with the Masumi, and Chihiro is sort of in the middle of this walkway, right? And on the other side of the walkway, we see coming through the gate is none other than both Iori and Ikura. As we see the two of them just walk in here, and Chihiro notices both of them. And it's honestly just something we see for a really, really brief second. And honestly, it's just so incredibly funny, because it's like, how did they get here? Presumably Chihiro and Samura made it a long, long way away from the Kyoto Bloodshed Hotel. And I'm sure what actually happened was the Masumi just simply like grabbed Iori and Ikura as they were getting out of there and brought them here to this battlefield where they're currently fighting. But honestly, it's just really funny to go through and be like, oh yeah, so Ikura and Iori, the long walkers. Like, it's like, come on now, like... Like, they just got here all of a sudden, and I just love how we just see Iori being like, oh my gosh, this is crazy, and Ikura, who's just in the background. I'm glad that he's not being relegated, just like, oh yeah, you're going to stay there, you're not that important, because, like, he played a very important role, and I'm sure that, like, Iori would object to that, like, I want to make sure Ikura comes with us to, like, stay safe, but it honestly just makes me feel sad for the guy in the Kyoto Bloodshed Hotel. Is like, man, Hirohiko's just better than all of us. I wanted him to join the main crew. And Ikura, you know, I honestly hope that Ikura sticks around for a little while, because I do like this random kid who's just like, I don't know what I'm doing, but maybe he can have, like, a really cool sorcery. And also, he still got Chihiro's scar drawn on his face there in a moment, too. It's honestly pretty awesome, right? But either way, seeing Iori and Ikura sort of walk up into this battle area, Chihiro looks down on the ground and reaches down with his left hand and picks up the hilt of Inten, as he just says, Aka Suzaku. And we see that Samura's like, Suzaku, like, I knew it. He was replicating all of my powers, and he's trying to heal his hand. He just thinks like, hey, Suzaku is a brand new power to him, and he can't instantly master the skill. And I even took out the bone, not just flesh, so it'll take at least 10 to 20 seconds at the very least. The Masumi are trying to buy him time, right? And as all of this is happening, we see that Rogue sort of sees that Samura's like dealing with all of this in his mind, and he's like, hey, Samura, why so anxious? He just thinks like, hey, we all know that Suzaku could heal your eyes, and with sight, the Masumi would be a powerless force against you. But nonetheless, Samura or Rogue just thinks like, hey, you're afraid to open your eyes to a future in which you go on living. As we just see that Samura's like, no, silence, you fool. I know what the future looks like. As of course, the only way he can remember this is back to his daughter and all of the images of everything going wrong for her. Her having to clean off the dye scribbles on the wall of their family home, her getting bullied at school, her desk being flipped over, all of her hair in a shower drain, and of course the image of her feet dangling from the ceiling. And Samura just doesn't want to do it. He's like, I know what the future looks like. And he uses a massive blast of his spirit energy in his sword, the EI White Purity style, to pretty much blow all Ro, Moku, and Sumi away from the area around Samura, right? As we just get a little bit more narration saying like, hey, the Masumi are Samura's strongest possible adversaries. But even so, they only managed to hold him for under 3 seconds. A simple, mere moment. And Samura thinks like, hey, I'm sorry guys, but he thinks like, hey, no time to heal at all. As Ro's like, no, you're failing to see something very important. As the narration continues saying, a simple, mere moment. Enough time to re-grip the sword. As we see that Chihiro has teleported behind Samura using the abilities of Aka Crow here in a moment, and he's got the White Purity style in his hand. His hand is so bloodied, leaking blood everywhere, and as we see, as Chihiro grasps the sword, it's not looking good for him. But the kata of the sword pretty much launches out here in the moment, and Samura's like, what are you telling me? Like, Chihiro didn't heal? And he just thinks like, no, he isn't trying to recover himself. He's pouring it all in to a single attack. As Chihiro just says like, hey, none of us care about how slashed up we get. As we don't see the exact moment of Chihiro unleashing his blast here in the moment, but we can sort of tell that he opens it up, Samura barely dodges it, and crashes on with Tobimune here on the moment. And honestly, it's really interesting because we just get a small shot of Iori's face looking up at this big event, and we just see the water around wherever Chihiro and Samura are fighting. All of the ripples flowing through the water, really breaking up the reflection of Chihiro and Samura clashing their blades here in a moment. It's honestly a really cool visuals, like the water's just rippling all up here in a moment. We just get a close-up on Samura's face as he's blocking the sword. And then we get a good look at Inten slicing to Tobimune's, and a small chip being formed in Tobimune's blade. And that's where we end this chapter of Kagurabachi, chapter number 84. And yeah, a really good chapter through and through, sitting down, just seeing this very dynamic battle, all of them going back and forth, the Masumi stepping in to help out, Chihiro thinking about healing his hand, but no, he needs to deliver a massive blow to Samura, and how does he do that? But showing him that he has the power to break Tobimune, and thus the Shinuchi, meaning that Samura can open up his eyes to a world in which he can live on. Honestly, it's a very powerful and poetic note that Ro gives here, and as much as a lot of us thought that Samura was going to die for the longest time, like he was going to be this deeply flawed character, it's one of these things where Samura is going to live here in this moment. And I don't think Samura is going to be making it out of this arc alive, though. We have the whole moment of where Chihiro goes through, breaks Tobimune, and Samura realizes that he can potentially go on living. He can help out Chihiro in this task, but at the same time, even with the stub of an enchanted blade, it still has the power to raise people from the dead in Suzaku. And this, I think, is going to be a problem for the series long term, because, like, any injury that can be sustained can just be sort of, like, overdone. And if Tobimune fully breaks and it can't be used anymore, like the hilt gets stolen or something like that, then we have the realization of the other two bears, Subaru, and the other pink bears. I think a lot of people have been calling them the lady. We know that they may not have the opportunity to survive, like, of course, Aruha has already. So it's one of these conflicting things of, like, how are we going to do this at the end of the day? Is Chihiro going to use Suzaku with intent to heal up the Tobimune blade? And it's honestly just a lot of really weird things that we could be getting here, but if I had to guess, by the end of the next chapter, we are going to see that Tobimune is fully cracked and chipped, and that Samura will be willing to lay down his arms, pretty much, and help out Chihiro. But then if I had to guess, we may have, like, a Hishaku member come through and, like, stab him in the back, like the whole moment from Undead Unluck after the spring arc of, like, hey, yeah, we're getting done with you, pretty much, and I'm going to be one of your newer, bigger adversaries here for a little while. And I think that'd just be a good way to do it, because Samura's story is almost over. It's taken about 40 chapters to get to this point, and it's been an amazing ride the entire way. I mean, I think this chapter marks 40 chapters, not only since I started covering this manga, but also since the Rakuzachi ended, which is also just like, wow, I can't believe that, like, Sojo and Rakuzachi was just, like, the first 44 chapters, you know what I'm saying? And then we've been in Swordbearer Assassination, or at least what I think a lot of people are calling, like, the versus Samura part of this for the longest time. So honestly, a lot of really good stuff in this chapter. Like I said, if I have any predictions for next chapter, it's legitimately very simple. Samura's blade is going to probably crack next time, and we're going to have another member of the Hishaku come through to pretty much get rid of Samura when it looks like he's going to be able to live. Because I still don't think he's living through this arc. Do I want him to? Yes, of course. I like this character, and I want to see more of him, but I think it's going to be better for both Iori and Ikura, hopefully, as a character, if they see him die here in a moment, because I want Ikura to help join the crew, you know what I'm saying? But either way, thank you guys so very much for watching this video on Kagurabachi chapter number 84. If you guys think I left out anything talking about the chapter, if you guys have a better theory than what I have, leave it down in the comments down below. And if you're going to see some of my other Kagurabachi content, well, you're in the right place. So it'll not only be a end card on the end screen of this video, like the final 15 seconds, but also there'll be a place link down in the description box down below of all my other Kagurabachi chapter views. As I just mentioned, I've been covering this series since chapter number 44, so if you guys are interested, there's a whole playlist there for you guys to go and check out. And also, I cover plenty of other anime and manga related content, so just go to my channel at Glowplasma on YouTube to check out all of that various stuff. And also, one final Kagurabachi thing, I need to keep remembering to mention this every single video I do, but I am on a podcast called the Kabanagi Headquarters. It is a Kagurabachi podcast where we pretty much just talk about the chapters, but instead of just me, it is 4 people, and it somehow goes on for twice as long as these videos do, and most of the time goes on for 3 times as long. Like, an hour and 30 minutes is about where our episodes tend to lie, if not like an hour and 10 or something like that, but yeah, thank you guys so much for watching. You guys can check out that podcast on podcasting platforms like Apple Podcasts and Spotify, and there's also a YouTube channel at the Kabanagi Headquarters. So yeah, hope you guys have a good day at the end of all of this. Good Kagurabachi chapter, and I will hopefully see you guys next Sunday whenever the next chapter of Kagurabachi releases, but no promises, because I am not keeping any promises when I know there's a high chance I may break them, because I am bad at putting out videos on time. But yeah, fall out of the way. I'll catch you guys later. This will be Glowplasma 231, signing out. Maybe I should have, like, Aka Glowplasma or something like that. I don't know. What would that power be? Alright, I'll catch you guys later. See y'all later.